Welcome back to another episode of the Heroes Veritas podcast. If you've been subscribed for a while, you would notice that there's a pretty big gap in the last podcast and this one. I believe the last one was in July, and this podcast is being released here in May, July of last year, May of the next year. The reason for that was because I backburned the podcast as it wasn't where I wanted to put the energy for Heroes Veritas. However, in recent days, I have reassessed where I want to take Heroes Veritas. The vision has grown, the impact has grown, and the new direction is going to make the podcast a mainline highlighter for our efforts. And so we're going to reallocate the time back to the podcast. You're going to get back to weekly frequency, hearing from me, and we're going to start bringing in those lessons so that you can have content every week. Before we get into today's topic, I did want to make some announcements. Since the last time we released a podcast episode, we have had numerous events. We have had many talking opportunities, hosted events, as well as attending events. And that's really drawn us to the new iteration of Heroes Veritas. A lot of people that have been watching our podcast or connecting with me on Instagram has seen the growth, the progress, and the evolution of Heroes Veritas. That's going to continue here moving into the next year until we get to the newest ideal that we have. And then beyond that, we have even bigger plans. I've brought on a whole new team to help me develop and build out Heroes Veritas. So that's a huge announcement. And that in itself is having a team behind me to support bringing as much content and value to you guys as I possibly can. Second, one of the events that we had planned, if you've been following Instagram or being on the website, was the King's Calling event here in May. However, May 12th to the 15th was when it was planned. We ran into some issues we just couldn't overcome, along with some attendance minimum requirements not being met. So we've made the assessment of the event and decided to actually cancel that event. So that event is no longer happening May 12th through the 15th. It is planned to be rescheduled to later in the year. However, no new date has been set. Along with that, no new itinerary nor location has been set. So make sure you like, subscribe, and keep up to date. Maybe even join the newsletter to stay up to date with that. Second announcement, or I guess third, is that as we move forward, we're going to be building out the actual integration to a new system, to where you will now not only have these free videos where we touch on topics high level, we are now building out a system where you can actually have premium services where they're hands-on courses that we can train you with, and they'll be able to walk you through step by step. This is born out of my personal experience in life, anecdotal experience, experiential data that I've collected, not only in my own life, but in helping my clients. We're going to be pulling the lessons out of my coaching programs, and we're going to make them available to you one by one, a la carte, or as bundles as we move forward. This is a great step forward for Heroes Veritas because this is going to give us the ability to connect with more people, to provide more content, as well as expand our reach so that we can develop a better value proposition for you, our audience. So we really look forward to having that released and hopefully seeing you be part of that subscription and that student repertoire. Right now, we have 5 courses in the works. However, we have a full curriculum of around 165 courses that we'll be releasing over a timeline of about a year. Once we get to that point where we've released the 165 various courses, we'll be looking to expand on that throughout by bringing on guest coaches, guest trainers, bringing in experts within their field, and really delivering the value content to you outside of the podcast. The podcast will continue during that time. However, that is going to be our big premium push so that you guys can have access to most up-to-date and functional tactical skill sets that we can provide you. All right, now with all that said, all the red tape out of the way, this conversation has been coming up a lot, not only within my own personal interactions, but also with my client interactions, as well as with my peer interactions, other coaches that I work with, other people that are in the space of helping men develop and build. And it's an area that I believe gets overlooked way too often for how important it is. And that's the concept of conviction. Unfortunately, conviction, like many things in today's world, have really gotten a bad rap. In fact, if you look up conviction quotes, you will find that there is a high percentage of like quotes about conviction, holding convictions, that are highlighted in a very negative space. They're used in a way of saying that somebody is over the top or eccentric. But in reality, conviction is an actual requirement for traversing society. It's also even more so a requirement if you want to have the discernment of a leader within your tribe. There's an old quote that I absolutely love, and it's often used, but it's also often misquoted or at least misappropriated. And that quote is, "He who stands for nothing falls for anything." Now, most generally, people use this quote to talk about fence straddlers, people that don't have opinions or people that don't have the ability to hold to a certain degree or a certain line when challenged with adversity or opposition. And philosophically, that is true, right? Fence straddlers do tend to have this kind of demeanor, passive aggressive demeanor, where they hold a belief, and then when somebody challenges them and says, "No, I believe this," they go, "Oh, actually, you know what? You're right. I was mistaken," so on and so forth. So you can't really nail down what they believe in. Why is this so critical? Well, as a leader of your tribe, if you want to build something bigger, if you want to be a decision maker and a leader within your own space, you have to have the capacity to face adversity while still challenging yourself to do what's best for your tribe. If you lack the conviction, every time somebody comes out of the woodwork and chastises you or tells you it's the wrong move or brings new data to the table that maybe doesn't align with where you want to go, you'll end up changing directions all the time, and you'll never be confident making a decision that you really need to make. Oftentimes, this leads people to feel like they're unheard. It leads people to feel like they don't have the justification or the edification to make decisions. And then those below them, those who are being led by them, it makes them feel that they can't be trusted. They can't be led properly because they're looking for somebody to stand their ground and say, "This is what's best for my people." And so what ends up happening is when we lack conviction, we get what's called what I would call shiny penny syndrome. And this plays out in many different arenas. In leadership, it plays out in the inability to make informed decisions and stick with that decisions. In leadership, as well as at the follower level or at the peer level, it comes with the inability to stay accountable to your decisions, and it creates blame and resentment. So say I want to hold a decision and I made a decision, we're going to go with this, but I lack conviction. When that decision falls apart or it didn't work out, I start blaming everybody around me instead of taking accountability and saying, "No, that was my decision," because I lack that conviction. It plays out in business, especially with business ideas. We have a lot of people that will end up chasing shiny pennies. What that looks like, especially in today's world, we have NFTs and crypto and forex trading. And so people will start a business, like say a t-shirt company, and it doesn't take off right away, or they don't have the momentum that they thought they were going to get. And then somebody comes out of the woodwork and says, "Hey, if you join NFT, you'll get rich quick." So then they go to NFT. When that one doesn't pan out, somebody says, "Hey, if you get into forex trading," they run to forex trading. So what you're doing is you're starting new races every time you move, and you never run a race to its completion. And that's because you lack conviction in your actual direction. Stick to your guns. When you set a goal, run at that goal with everything you got and become absolutely relentless and ruthless about reaching that goal before you start entertaining outside influences, because otherwise you're just starting marathons over and over and over again. At mile 1, you turn around and you go back to start. Mile 1 again, go back to start. You don't want to get into that cycle. It's extremely exhausting. So conviction has a very positive place in our life, but for whatever reason, a lot of us have a very negative intention or expectation of conviction. And I think a lot of this comes from this place of, if somebody has conviction, they're seen as being either egotistical or self-righteous, or even possibly unyielding and unwavering, because there's a certain level of unyielding behavior that comes from conviction. When you have self-respect, when you know what you want, when you know where you're going, people will often want you to be malleable to what makes them feel more comfortable. And so when you stick to your guns and you say, "No, this is my line, this is my ideal, this is my philosophy," it oftentimes will be misconstrued or misunderstood as ego, when in reality it's conviction, it's self-respect. So how do you develop conviction? I get this question a lot. Okay, and you say conviction is important. You just highlighted exactly why that is important. I know the quote, "He who stands for nothing falls for anything," but I'm not a conviction based person. I don't hold a lot of conviction. I'm not very resolute. I don't hold to my guns. How do you develop that? The first and foremost action that you need to take is you have to understand what it is you're trying to be resolute in. What are your convictions? Most people don't take the time to actually retreat into themselves, spend some time on themselves, and determine what's so important to them that they will die for, quite literally or figuratively. What is so important for you that no matter what happens, you will not change your opinion? And a good example of this, and it's an extreme example, so bear with me because a lot of people get a little, spiky about this, but murder, right? There are people out there that will not, that don't believe in murder, but they're not so resolute in being against murder that they don't have expectations that it's okay or not okay or when it's okay, because they've never thought about it. They just create a blanket statement: murder's bad. Okay, cool. But what if you change the context? War, terrorist attack. What if the context is you're defending your family? Is murder still wrong? But then you get into that conversation of self-defense versus murder. Murder is premeditated. Murder is typically not for any reason. Maybe it was out of anger, maybe it was resentment, maybe it was just random. Whereas other people make this justification that self-defense is different than murder. Murder is murder. Murder is the taking of a life that isn't yours. So when you don't take the time to start navigating the philosophy behind these things, a lot of people start to be more malleable for people around them. Person A says, I'm against murder. Person B says, yeah, I'm against murder too, except when. And then person A goes, okay, I can see your point. You have to understand where your lines are, because there's different degrees of everything within the line. And that goes across the board. Something as critical as murder all the way down to, favorite foods, favorite sodas, right? There's a movie, it's a romantic comedy called The Runaway Bride. And this highlights it very, very well. In the movie, Julia Roberts plays a character who's been married 7 times, and she runs at the altar every time. And a news anchor comes to find out what she's like, why she does this. And one of the things he highlighted is this person had such low conviction levels that she didn't even know what type of eggs she liked. She couldn't even make an opinion on the type of egg she liked, because she would just change it for whoever was around her. And that blended into all of her other decision points, because she couldn't make a decision unless somebody else made the decision first, and then she would just align to it. This is the downside of not having conviction. If you don't have conviction, you'll constantly be at the beck and call and whim of people around you, outside influences, and it makes you feel very disconnected, makes you feel very unheard. So take the time, spend that time determining what it is that you will die for, what it is that you believe, and commit to it all in. That isn't to say you be unyielding. Just determine what it would take for you to actually change that position, and at least have the baseline identified. Like, this is my conviction. I'm holding this conviction unless new data comes to be. Once you know what your non-negotiables are, what your resolutions are, what your values are, what your virtues are, then determine the line by which you'll move. Okay. Some people's variance from that line is very far. Some of it's very narrow. Some of it's not at all. How stoic are you going to be when somebody challenges you? How combative are you going to be? Are you going to be forthright in listening? Are you going to be, dismissive? Start becoming intentional about, okay, these are my convictions. If somebody challenges these convictions, what is my argument against it? What is my pros? What are my cons? If they bring valid information, how am I going to handle that valid information? Do I dismiss it? Do I integrate it? Do I just say, hey, listen, I'd like to agree to disagree. I don't want to get into it. This is just my belief system. I'm not trying to change it. Become intentional about how you would handle that situation. Jordan Peterson has a great quote. He says, thought is so that our thoughts can die. We think so that our thoughts can die in our stead. What he means by that is you can play out all the situations so that instead of risking yourself, your physical self, your corporeal self, you can just risk the thought. And so that the thought can die in our place means that we can grow and we can risk without risking our corporeal selves. So Be intentional, create those thoughts. Let that thought die or live rather than your own corporeal self. And then practice it daily. It doesn't have to be crazy, but get used to making decisions, right? One of the greatest opportunities people got when Starbucks came to be is it's a control point. When Starbucks came into view and Starbucks could, and people started being able to order coffee, it gave them a control point. They had all these options on the menu and they start to get their drink. They start to know, I like my coffee at 135 degrees. I like my coffee black. I like my coffee with a little cream. I like it with a little caramel. That is a great place to start if you've never practiced making decisions, if you've never practiced setting your flag and saying, this is what I want, because then you can start becoming very deliberate about, I want my coffee this way. And if you don't like it that way, then you can change it, but you can always hold accountable to those coffees. The caveat to that is that because it's so easy to make those decisions, you have to commit to the decision. So if you order a coffee and it tastes like crap, you don't make them make you a new one. You don't order something else. You stick to that until the next day. That's part of the exercise. You have to stick to the decision. You have to run it to ground. Drink the whole thing, throw it away. But you have to make those decisions. You can't regret that decision. You just say, oh, this isn't exactly what I wanted, but tomorrow I'll make another one. Drink the coffee. Stick to the decisions. That's how you practice a low risk level of conviction. Over time, you can start putting yourself into situations where ask people if they'd be open to debate with you. Ask people if they'd be open to sit with you and talk philosophically. Have deeper conversations with your closest confidants and friends. And don't adjust your line just because they say that. Let them know, hey, I've never done this before. I'm trying to get better at debate. I'm trying to get better at sticking to my guns. I'm trying to get better at civilly discussing my positions, but I'm not very good at it. So would you give me the opportunity, the honor of debating with me with the patience, knowing that I might not be great at this? And do that with people you trust. So those are some tips on developing conviction. A lot of times when we talk about conviction, we put a lot of gravitas and weight behind it. We talk about it politically. We talk about it socially. We talk about like what would happen if somebody attacked your family. Do you have the resolution and conviction to defend them with your life on the line? Most men will say yes when it comes to their family, especially their wives and children, significant other and children. And that is the grand level of conviction. But in order to develop the grand level of conviction, to know you'd be capable of making those grand gesture decisions, those large implication-based decisions and high-risk decisions, you need to play it at the arbitrary level, right? A lot of people will say you're wound too tight or you're over the top or whatever, but the reality is it's a practice mechanism. Those who can stay convicted in the low arbitrary realm are more likely going to be able to do it in the upper echelon realm. Those who are unable to remain resolute in the basic stuff, the arbitrary stuff, and let people overstep their boundaries are going to be less likely to uphold it when it matters the most. So I really hope that this new episode hit home, resonated. Love to hear from you guys. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe. Again, we're going to start getting these frequency out there. And so if you guys have ideas of topics you want to know my thoughts on or anything like that, please hit me in the comments or send me a message, and hopefully we'll see you guys soon.